This weekend, the World Cup returns to France, and I thought it was worth a look. What are the chances of home glory? Cyclocross may nowadays be the sport of the Belgians and the Dutch, but back in the early days it was the French who towered over everybody else. The sport even sees its beginnings in France. In 1950, the first edition of the Cyclocross World Championships were held in Paris. The podium that day was entirely filled by home riders as well. The winner of this inaugural edition was in fact Jean Robic, a man who 3 years earlier had won the Tour de France. In fact, the first 9 editions of the World Championships were all won by French riders. Interestingly though, since then, the only French winner has been Dominique Arnaud in 1993. The women have admittedly performed a lot better. In the 21st century they've taken 4 world titles, 2 for Laurence Leboucher, 1 for Marilyn Salvetat, and Pauline Ferrand-Prévot won the most recent one in 2015. However, since that win, it feels like there's been a slow but consistent decline in French activity at the front of the race. However, this year, the tide might be starting to turn. A decade ago, the French tricolore was a regular fixture at the front of the cyclocross field. Francis Mouret flew the flag with regularity at the top of major races. Lucie Chanel-Lefebvre, Caroline Mani and Pauline Ferrand-Prévot all made regular top 10 appearances too. But as they grew older and Ferrand-Prévot's focus drifted more towards the mountain bike, the next generation just didn't really appear. Collectively as a generation, the next era of French cyclists seemed to choose the road. Most promising of these young riders was some kid called Julien Alaphilippe, taking a silver medal at the 2010 Junior World Championships in Tabor. Alaphilippe would then spend 2 more years riding cross in the junior categories, even winning a round of the Under-23 World Cup in Rome. But from then on he made the switch to road, which I reckon might have been a good move. At roughly the same time, Clément Vantorini was breaking through. Vantorini even made the elite category, even finishing as high as 4th at the World Cup at Hogerheide in 2017. To this day, Vantorini is the national champion at elite level, only one of 2 crosses he rode last year however. Other under-23 riders that performed well include Aurélien Duval, Arnaud Geoffroy, Fabien Dubé and Clément Rousseau, all 4 of which have gone on to 4 decent careers on the road. In the women's peloton, a similar phenomenon was noticeable. Juliette Laboule looked arguably the strongest prospect, but she made the move to road, still going strong with Team DSM nowadays. Following on from her, there's a trio at Francis Desjeux nowadays, including 2-time French under-23 women's champion Jade Wheel, as well as Maëlle Grossetête, and the current French national road race champion Evita Musique. And with what was essentially a whole generation of talent that went missing, Caroline Mani and Marlène Petit were left to carry the French hopes on their own. Steve Chanel doing his very best to be even almost relevant on the men's side. But throughout the past 2 years the French have come through somewhat of a revival. Whilst results on the men's side are still lacking, riders like Hugo Jo, Joshua Dubois, David Menu and Jan Gras are all making semi-regular appearances. I mean, Dubois even managed the top 15 at the World Cup recently in Overijse. On the women's side, everything is looking slightly rosier. National champion Amandine Fouquenet and Agnès Maurichon have both been visible at the front of multiple races. Caroline Mani is still going strong in the USA, but most of the plaudits ought to go to the French team AS Bike. AS Bike were founded 2 years ago and this year seems to have properly hit their stride. Helene Clausel seems to have decided to be this year's token fast rider that drops back to the edge of the top 10. She's managed to just about sneak inside of it once in Waterloo. Her sister Perrine has also put in a handful of decent performances, but the most realistic hope for France right now lies on the impressively narrow shoulders of their 18-year-old teammate Line Burquier. Despite only riding 2 crosses amongst the world's best so far this year, Burquier has been this season's breakthrough rider. She burst onto the scene with an incredible performance in Zonhoven, taking an 8th place, a career first top 10, making her the youngest rider in the top 10 that day. The week after she went even better, finishing 6th in Overijse, landing on the U23 podium for the first time and again being the youngest rider to reach the top 10. She then made an appearance at the European Championships racing the Under-23 women's race. Here she finished 4th, being the only rider to put up any decent fight against the dominant Dutch women's side. Burquet has missed out on the rounds in Tabor and Koksijde, but will return for the World Cup in Besançon. The stars would have to align for something major, but home soil could push Burquet and those distinctive red gloves to a pretty good result. The worry I have when I look at this current crop of French riders is that again I think they could end up leaving cross. They may smell greener pastures this time in the mountain bike. Burquet is a junior world champion, both the Clausel's race mountain bike too, as does Joshua Dubois, and so does Star Casino's youngster Olivia Onesti. Hugo Jo has floated with it in the past as well. On the road, meanwhile, David Benu, Jan Gras, Amandine Fouquenet and Agnès Morichon are all facing various degrees of success too. It could well be back to square one for French cyclocross. Luckily though, as I'm recording this, it looks like there's been a very positive development. Clément Vantorini has announced in L'Équipe his plan to pick up cyclocross once more. This December, after a training camp with his team AG Desert, Vantorini will start racing locally before moving on to the World Cups in Hulst, Flamanville and Hoorheide. It's also in his plans to ride the National Championships in Livin and attempt to race the World Championships later this year at Fayetteville. Vantorini announcing this news is very exciting for me. I've missed the French flag at the front of these races and I hope Vantorini can pick up his old form. If you want to follow the racing in France and try and foster any degree of staying power whatsoever in the riders, then the Coupe de France would be the right place to start. 6 of the 8 rounds have already passed, however. The final 2 rounds will be held on the 11th and 12th of December in Troyes. David van der Poel and Laurien Durafoug are the defending winners. With 90 points still available this season, 6 men and 8 women are mathematically still in the fight. However, on the men's side, it's realistically a battle between the French Joshua Dubois and the Swiss Timon Roeg. Amandine Fouquenet looks likely to win the women's competition, but Agnès Morichon is still capable of winning. Do keep in mind that these races are on the same weekend as the World Cup in Val d'Isole, so some riders may give that precedence. As for where to watch, I don't really know. I mean, the official site doesn't make me any wiser. I think Cyclocross France will have a live stream up. They have had one for the earlier rounds. Alternatively, you could just travel to Troyes and have a weekend away. I mean, it seems a lovely place. Just treat yourself. After these races, the French domestic scene is over, apart from the National Championships in Livin on the weekend of 8 and 9 January 2022. Interestingly, Livin will play host to the World Championships in 2025. Other than that, this Sunday is one of 2 World Cup rounds in France. Besançon is, as I mentioned, this Sunday, whilst Flamanville will form the penultimate round on the 16th of January. All in all, it seems like from the outside, French cyclocross is at its healthiest in a while, though it seems entirely dependent on the choices of a handful of young riders who could well choose other disciplines in the future. But with Icebike gaining more and more standing in the cyclocross field, the future could still be a better one. I'm more curious to see where it goes. Whilst the glory days of the full French World Championship podiums are pure fantasy nowadays, a medal could maybe only be a few years away. Also, I'd love to see Alaphilippe back. That'd be good, wouldn't it?